We've got Mike Hranica from The Devil Wears Prada and God Alone on the podcast. Another episode where I talk to someone who I find interesting and try to poke at their mental models for how they think about the world and ask them questions that hopefully elucidate some of the insights that they've gleaned from doing interesting stuff. Also digging into some of the more tactical aspects of what they have going on, sometimes with music, sometimes with fitness, sometimes with academia, all that kind of stuff. In this case, we're obviously talking about music and the creative process. And Mike has a lot of different irons in the fire, so to speak, with his creativity, being the main lyricist for The Devil Wears Prada, as well as writing stuff for a separate project called God Alone, which is more of a noisy Jesus Lizard-esque rock band, which is pretty cool because that confuses and upsets a lot of Devil Wears Prada fans, which Mike is totally okay with. So we dig into how he approaches all his different creative endeavors, how he thinks about creating stuff for different bands, how he relates concepts related to writing lyrics compared to writing prose, since he always had an ambition of being a writer growing up. We also dig into the ideas behind operating in a band with expectations, right? So The Devil Wears Prada has a lot of fans and sort of machinery behind it, and there's a lot that comes with that, which is not necessarily what people realize, on the outside. They think it's just, you're on tour and it's fun and everything's great, but there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff with music business and touring and choosing support acts that goes into that isn't really, the most fun stuff to deal with. So being in another band where you can just kind of let loose and bum people out is pretty cool. Mike is also starting a coffee company where he will be helping artists and bands kind of private label some interesting roasts of coffee. So that's a pretty fascinating business endeavor that Mike's getting into over the next few months. So we talk about that, as well as what the hell it even means for coffee to be bright. So hope you like it. Check it out.
I like establishing rules.
Yeah.
So when it comes to collaborating, anything creative for me, if we can, being so obsessive compulsive about so many things and a little bit of a neat freak.
Yeah.
If someone has.
Are you a germaphobe also?
No.
Okay, cool.
I'm not actually. I'm not. I'm not super dirty, but I have some weird tics.
Yeah.
Actually, I think I have the opposite of weird tics. For me,
normal tics.
No, the normal tics for most people don't.
Is your favorite cartoon show The Tick?
No. Maddie, I'm just thinking about this because I have yet to justify it in my head, but food, hair and food doesn't bother me.
Okay, sure.
Because I love to cook, so I'll make Maddie and I a meal, and my beard is all through it. And she picks it out and she's sees it on my plate and I just eat it. I'm well, let's just by my mouth. Hair and food doesn't bother me.
You should get one of those hair nets for
hair nets for yeah. The sad guy at the grocery store.
Yeah.
That's the meat guy or whatever.
Yeah.
Has to wear the thing on his face.
Yeah. Very unhappy. Very, very unhappy individual.
Yeah.
I think that, in the discussion of the creative process, one of the questions I had for you is how disciplined are you with your creativity and how much does it just kind of come to you?
Discipline is weird for me. I'm either all in or all out. So as far as I kind of equate it similarly to procrastination, because so basically the way I work is if I don't do it immediately, I don't do it at all. So if anything, as far as small tasks, as far as anything managerial, as far as running one of the bands or anything in my life, I got to get on it right away, or then I forget. So with discipline, I think that's my biggest thing is it comes from there, as far as I discipline myself to do things immediately. But then at the same time, as far as songwriting, it can be very different. I'm very all over the place as far as playing guitar, or when I sit down to write out the vocals for a Prada song. It just kind of comes to me in weird times. And I also have such seasons as far as writing outside of anything musically. If there are times when things just come to me all the time, I can't watch a movie or a TV show or a game, more than likely a hockey game, without having some idea and jotting things down. So it comes to me in like kind of ebbs and flows and waves, and it's kind of the same in like outside of creativity too, as far as like fixing up my house, like having an old house and painting or doing these menial tasks. I'll want to be doing something like that, something like with my hands, like religiously, and nothing creative. And then when I have like the sort of mental or creative capacity to do something creative, then I'll get on that. But I like having breaks and doing things that like have nothing to do with flexing your mind, kind of like Josh talking about being a janitor.
Yeah.
It's almost kind of the same with that. Like I really like when I take on work outside of the band, as far as like I worked up in Evanston like a year and a half ago in this warehouse doing like order fulfillment. Yeah. And like for me, that's it's you're busy and you're doing something, but at the same, it kind of lets your mind open up too. I find so. I still haven't really confirmed my rhythm as far as how I work or when I come to do something creatively. So I don't know. Yeah. I have no idea what I'm doing.
Well, I think there's also, I mean, you mentioned like, working in a warehouse or doing, fixing stuff up on your house, right? That there's an element of when you do something that's very tangible and physical like that, mm-hmm. that there's some sort of visual sense of completion that you don't necessarily get through writing a song or, doing more like, oh, I sent some emails.
Yeah, right? I certainly agree. Like, yeah, and I don't know, it like the busyness of it is really satisfying to me as well. Like I can't, if I'm bored, I get really anxious. I have troubles with anxiety, and if I don't have anything to do, then I'm in a bad place. So,
yeah. And so you sort of bounce between different, whatever activities and mm-hmm. sort of find like periodic fertile periods of, okay, like I'm really creating for, and does it, I know you mentioned, in a previous interview that you feel like you're in different rooms when you're creating for different projects.
Yeah.
Right? You sort of find yourself like in a room and all of a sudden there's a bunch of stuff there and you're like, oh great, I need to just like start.
I came up with that analogy, last year of like, I find myself like with like a number of different doorways, and I have to just enter in this space and do whatever's in that room. If that's like the Devil Wears Prada is that room, and then like God Alone, my other band, is that room, or whatever else I'm working on in my life. I can't be like in the Devil Wears Prada room yelling over to the God Alone room and vice versa and whatnot. So I compartmentalize, and I think I like to create assignments, and that's like mentioning discipline. I think that's kind of the backbone of it somewhere in my subconscious, perhaps.
Yeah. So you must have like a project that you're working on, and when you're feeling whatever creatively fertile, then it's like, all right, great, we're nailing this one. And then when it's done, you kind of move on to another one.
Yeah. Something like that. And then taking breaks between all of it, as far as that's something else, as far as like cooking and being able to exercise my creativity, is because you're also, you take it from the very, the most base thing as far as going to the store, and then taking that and doing whatever you want with it, and then consuming it, and fueling your body and your life. So I find a lot of I don't know if you like, a lot of relief and a lot of satisfaction from that. And I always like breaking up things in my day, because I'm also like, I always try to time things so much, and I always want to handle things so much. I'm like, it kills me when I'm late. Like I was 4 minutes late.
You're like, I'm really sorry. I'm like, dude,
kills me. It kills me. Really, like, I always like to be on time, and it's nice like at home when you have like that half hour, because it's always at like 5:30 or around then, depending on what I'm cooking. As far as like, this happens the same way every day, and I always really like that. And I try to do the same on tour, even though it's never cooking and it kills me. Something that's been harder about touring as I get older is not having the regularity of it, because I definitely also like scheduling and a routine about my day.
Wait, so you try to cook on tour?
No.
Yeah.
Can't.
Let's say, yeah, what are you going to do?
Yeah. Because I'm also like, I love the way everything is exactly how it is at home. And like, I know where this ingredient is and that ingredient. And like, I know in the back of my mind, like, yeah, I just bought that. I have enough of
coriander.
Yeah. To make this meal again in 3 days or whatever. So,
So when you cook then, are you rigidly following recipes, or are you kind of creating a weird rigid environment and then being creative within it?
Sort of. I definitely have a habit of sticking too much to a routine, and then like I can always explore more and try something different. But usually the way I go about it is if I have like a recipe and I'll make the recipe once and then say like, okay, I now know how to make that. Next time I'm going to do it my way, and just like go off of that. Yeah, something like that. Like I remember like just the first time you make like a bechamel sauce, and then just applying that in a different means next time, or adding, more shallot or whatever you're doing, I guess. So I kind of go off that, I guess, cooking wise, and almost, I guess, the same as, like you learn a song a certain way once and then you change it and do it your way. And then you have your own song, or as like a guitar player, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think the music analogy there is, I mean, you run into the same thing where some people go to a show and they expect to see the exact song that was on the record. It's like that fill was different. Yeah. Like that was not the same drum fill.
Right.
What is this, right? Whereas other shows are like purposefully improvisational, where it's like you're not going to get the same thing twice.
Right.
And that, different people want different things out of the experience.
Right. I certainly appreciate the former.
Yeah.
Or the latter.
I don't know. Which one do you appreciate? The improvisation? I mean,
improvisational. Yeah. My brain's all over the place right now.
I mean, I think that I appreciate both, and I think it depends on what I actually want from it. Mm-hmm. Right? Because if you go to generally like a metal show, it's like, I want to hear the record. Like this is how the song goes. Like that's how the solo goes. Like that note was bent this much there. Yeah. And it better be exactly the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I think, or at least what I apply, is always that the singer needs to do something else.
Sure.
And the band needs to, like, I don't know. I make so many stupid little rules in my head as far as like I expect it to be this way and that way, and then my same in like my performances as far as in the Devil Wears Prada, I'll end up contradicting myself. And
what are your rules?
Well, just certain components of the band, like I just want it to sit a certain way, and if one member does it rather than the other, I'm like in a style wise, if it like contrasts or just grinds against it, I don't know. I have like these unspecified, like unstated expectations for certain things. Yeah. That I'm lucky enough to have with Prada, as far as, being in a band for 13 years plus, and being a 6-piece, having 3 original members, and still having like the regularity. I'm certainly grateful for it. And I'm not like super passive aggressive, but I'm extremely non-confrontational. Sure. Which is a pretty horrible recipe in terms of someone that also wants to make assignments and expectations for things. So it's something to work on. I'm also horribly impatient. So these are all
You got yourself a stew.
Yeah.
You got yourself a stew cooking.
Shit stew. Smorgasbord of bullshit. And that's my creative brain. Yeah. Something like that, I guess. Yeah, so you essentially have specific ways that you want the music to be, and then on top of that, you have ideas for how you want to like play with your vocal pattern or tonality or whatever. Is that kind of the... Yeah, I'll get into like certain ruts, and like I always notice it if we're on tour with a band that one that I actually like, and you watch their set a bunch. And then you pick up on, that dude does it different than the record, but he also does it the same way, and he gets stuck to that routine or gets stuck in that rut. I definitely do the same way or the same thing. You hear like Jeremy, who also sings in The Devil Wears Prada, like he does the same thing vocally. He'll hear a different melody and tweak it a little bit, and to me that like, and then that falls into like my parameters of approval. I would never say anything if it didn't, because again, I'm not I can't confront people ever, but it's convoluted for sure, twisty the way it works.
Well, and what aspects do you like playing with? Do you like playing with the rhythm, or is it more like I'm going to add a little bit here, or what's?
A little bit of everything. I just shout and yell. I hate the term screamer.
I mean, I feel like that's a term that people use seriously now, and I've only ever used that term as a joke.
It is a joke. I always like mean to be pretty upfront with it, as far as like, I'm not Adele, like I'm not a singer. I'm not like this gorgeous, powerful voice. It's just yelling. And how do you do it? And like, sometimes a fan will ask you about like, do you use this technique or that technique? And I laugh every time. It's just yelling.
Just yell.
It's just yell, dude. Like, but so I don't know, like different patterns and whatnot. I've kind of developed a little more of a yelly thing in my vocal range over the past since our fourth record in 2011 is kind of when I started playing with it, when we started working with a different producer and different.
I mean, you use it a lot more on the more recent record. Yeah,
a lot of yelly stuff. And then same with like last time I worked with Andy, we did here in Pilsen at Bricktop, we did a cover of a Julian Baker song that's pretty mellow throughout, and it's a lot of yelly stuff and even like almost kind of tickle melody, but I'm not a melodic person at all. I'm not a melodic singer or whatever.
So one of the rules is no melody.
Yeah, for me, I just don't work with melody the way that my bandmates do. It's all on their plate. That's their role, their assignment.
Yeah.
I'm the more abstract picture of things, kind of like my critiques or like any sort of like production component I bring to the table is all very like gut. It's not, this chord to that chord and what's theoretically happening. That's all on the other guys. So with that being in mind, when I'm mixing up the live show vocally, it's I don't know, just loose, I guess, for lack of a better term.
You should just do like a death grunt on every riff transition.
Live, man. Yeah, there's definitely more ooze these days. More ooze.
It's every single one.
Yeah.
I feel like on the Hate Force record, I kept wanting James to do that.
Yeah.
And he's like, dude, there's too many. I'm not doing it anymore.
Like every transition.
Yeah, I'm like, no, like it'll be cool. He's like, no, I'm not doing it anymore.
When are we going to hear that Hate Force record?
It's theoretically out in end of February.
Oh, sick.
Yeah. Have you heard it?
No, I want to.
I'll send it to you.
I feel bad. I feel like most of the times I text Drew, it's that like to ask for a favor, and I hate people that like hit me up only when they're asking
like,
for
please,
a favor.
Can I be on the guest list?
Yeah, like something like that. Yeah, for sure. And most of the time, Drew, I'm always asking for favors. Andy, the same, probably. So Ugh.
Awkward.
Yeah.
Awkward.
Sorry, fellas, but I do look forward to that record too, for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because that's we were talking earlier about like the band rules, right? I mean, that's like basically Drew's band, right? Like he's kind of like the main.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Although Hate Force is a little bit more collaborative than some other bands. So Drew, at least on the LP, wrote most of the material there. James wrote a few of the songs. I wrote one of the songs. And I think that, some of the stuff we kind of put together, but it's like mostly his.
What's it sound like?
Do you know the band Vastum? They're kind of like a contemporary, like primitive death metal band.
Okay.
Right, so it's kind of like mid-paced death metal.
Okay.
Like Drew likes parts that are just kind of like mid-paced and stupid, sort of. in a good way.
What's who was I just talking to that brought up Deathcore Drew?
Oh, I don't know.
Someone mentioned Deathcore Drew because he liked some like. God, am I just making this up? It might have been when we were with Andy recording Sour Breath.
Yeah.
I don't know the last time I've seen. Well, I guess I saw God Alone played G-Man in the summer sometime. I saw Andy then.
Yeah.
I don't know why we'd be talking about Deathcore Drew.
Deathcore Drew. Yeah. Drew has a wide palette of musical tastes.
I follow his From My Stacks Instagram.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And it's just, I'm envious. 'Cause I don't consume nearly as much music as someone like Drew. But his range is also just all over the place.
Yeah.
It's inspiring. It always makes me start to question what I'm listening to, or not even like question, why I'm listening to it, but well, maybe it is just that, why I'm listening to it, or what kind of emotions I'm hinting at, or what is it that intrigues me about certain things. And when I see what Drew's listening to, I'm always like, yeah, I'm just listening to spinning the same old records through and through. So,
well, I mean, I think that there's value in that though, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that I was reading a book recently about like memorization techniques, right? And essentially, one of the things that they were talking about was that in days of yore, right, people would essentially memorize these epic poems, right? It wasn't written down, and then they would spend their lives just going over the same story over and over again. Right. And you can extract so much more by just repeatedly going through this same tale, as opposed to like, oh, I'm going to like read this book and I'm going to read this book. And I have all these articles saved on my phone and I like subscribe to these email newsletters. Right. And that there's one isn't necessarily better or worse. And there's obviously value in both. But I think that I personally will get too caught up in like, again, assigning myself projects to get through amounts of content or like check out records or whatever. And then I think it can be beneficial to just sit with the same thing and like try to get everything out of it.
For sure. A part of like, I don't know, for me, like consuming music and not like being deeply apologetic about not listening to the most music, because I'm not like, I don't say it out of like regret that I'm not the most, I don't know, just the deepest music consumer. Like I don't listen, like it's just not a part of like a facet in my life. I think music the way it is to some people, and I don't like. I appreciate the competition to it, but sometimes I think it can also be uninvited to compete about how much music you listen to.
Sure.
For me, I feel a certain level of passion and like fervor towards other like elements of my life than just music. I feel like sometimes people are like disgruntled by that as like I'm a musician, that's how I pay the bills. I still always feel reluctant to call myself a musician because I'm not some Berklee trained like composer. But yeah, I sometimes I wonder like why it's such a big deal to say that like I love sports as much as I love music, or that I love literature as much as I love music or something. And sometimes people will be like, well, then why do you even play guitar? Why do you even sing or whatever? And that's, I don't know. I disapprove of that,
Yeah.
But there is something, and you were mentioning that when you were talking to James about competition in music. And I thought that was really inspiring, or I found that really interesting. Just, well, first of all, I'm like never around like high schoolers or like, quote unquote kids these days, and I thought it was really interesting how, and like him being an educator and being around younger folks, like there definitely is less of like the like crate digging you mentioned and whatnot. Like anyone can assume that much, but I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting competition. I'm just thinking about it because I heard you guys talking about it and now it's stuck on my mind, but
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think that like you mentioned, it's a lot of that stuff is also just signaling, right? People want to look a certain way, and that what people are putting out there as what they're doing is also not necessarily what they're doing too.
Right.
Yeah. And that's kind of like, I think it's, I don't know. It's more frustrating to me when people are obviously kind of like trying to display like, oh, I listen to all this stuff or I'm into all these things. It's like, no, you're not. You're not. Come on.
That certainly doesn't do anyone favors in sincerity. Yeah. I mean, like, I think that's something that I've really guided my life around is people, or surrounded myself with people that do pour everything they have into limited subjects rather than they want to be a little good at everything rather than being really good at a few things, I've always tried to visualize or, I don't know, sort of discipline myself in that same way throughout my life. And it's only like stuck around more. Like sometimes I feel bad that I question myself if I'm like too involved in too many things rather than just, holing up and reading books for 12 hours a day instead, or playing guitar 12 hours a day instead when, I'm thinking about this and that and this and that. But people playing to like or pretending to like certain music is definitely only getting more frustrating as I get older.
Well, but to your point earlier about like the different projects and focus and stuff like that, I mean, depending on what you're working on, it can also be beneficial to have, like you mentioned before, when you're in a certain mode, you're watching a hockey game and you're like, the way the light glints off the skate as it hits the ice, this is inspiration for a song, right? I mean, it's like, that you can pull from these other experiences and other things you're working on to like tie stuff together. I think that can be underrated for folks also. I'm
going to butcher this, but as a kid, I read, I haven't read much of it, although I'd certainly enjoy it. But like in high school, I read a ton of Stephen King.
Yeah.
And I still really appreciate Stephen King. His Twitter's pretty awesome.
Is it? I haven't looked at it ever.
Yeah, he's got wonderful sentiments towards President Trump.
Sure.
As we all do. But the foreword or the introduction or something to one of his books I read a long time ago is like, you have to read so much more than how much you write. And I always apply that to like music as well. Like if you're just writing music all day, like what good's it going to do if you don't have any, you don't have some record this year that you're just really stuck on, or some new band or some new sound or, so yeah, I again, not apologetic as far as consuming just as much as producing, and I always kind of keep mind of that proportion or ratio in my life. I'm not sure if it works that way, or if every artist can like visualizes it or keeps track of it as much as I do.
You mean in terms of like how much you consume versus how much you produce?
Right. And also I hate like always like the super jaded, like, well, there's nothing good to listen to anyway. Like that's bullshit. There's always, it shouldn't be as hard as it is to find good bands these days, but there's great records being put out,
Yeah, for sure.
So
when I think that also ends up happening with people who are stuck on certain genres, right? Where it's like, there may not be, great records in the genre that you want to listen to, but that doesn't mean that people aren't being creative elsewhere.
Right. For sure. And there's definitely I'm going to keep going back to the word discipline about getting to different genres or getting to, I've kind of just like one for the sake of like records that I didn't love at first. Like sometimes they grow on me. Sometimes that will be one of my like top 10 favorite records, or the ones where I first heard it and I was like, didn't do anything for me. But also it's good to consume it in such a way, or to force yourself to different genres, or force yourself to records that you don't appreciate so much, just for the helpfulness of the critique. Like for me to hear something and say, okay, why don't I like it? Just, I feel like educates a little something in me to where hopefully then I can take that same principle and apply it to making a better, Prada song, or a better riff or lyric, poem, whatever it might be.
Yeah, so you're at least like processing it in some form.
For sure.
Right? Like trying to at least get some sort of analysis out of it. Like, okay, like what is actually going on that I don't like? Yeah.
It's being like intentional and deliberate. And I feel like that's something that can be really productive in putting in your brain as far as to be deliberate with music, as much as other times you just want to turn off big time, you know? And I feel like that's something else. As much as it's important to get outside genres and apply different sources of inspiration to different work, it's the same as to listen with a different ear. And that's something that like in Prada world, and as we're devising this new record or creating and completing it, we're just trying to do everything from a different perspective. So that's the same way, you know, if you're creating from a different perspective, you need to consume from a different perspective too.
What do you mean by different perspective? Like trying to...
We like, so like the thing that I keep mentioning when people ask about the new material is like, not that you asked.
Please tell us.
It is just like John and Kyle, our keyboard player and our guitar player, they had like 20 to 30 demos or something. And they were actually getting together to finalize the Sour Breath cover. And they went through all of them and they were like, this is just Transit Blues Part 2, which was our most recent record.
Yeah. And
they're like, why would you want to hear just more of the same, you know? Like, and it's not to apologize for Transit Blues, because it's a record that we are proud of in the span of a 13-year timeline, from being little stupid scene kids to old cantankerous groaning men. But there's a lot we would also want to change about that record, for sure. In that, you know, we don't want to make those mistakes again. And we're trying to just really, like, so we just scrapped all those songs, or a large majority of them, and just said like, all right, what's going to be what people haven't heard before, which is also kind of cliche. You know, you've heard that from everyone. Like, it's always been like a tick for me. Like, what do you sound like? And someone goes, I don't know. Like, you sound like someone. Yeah. Like, every band sounds like someone. Like, I find it rather vain not to be able to say, oh, we sound like, this is what I loved when this band started, and this is what, you know, we're born from. But this record is something we're trying to do, is just not make people feel uncomfortable, but hopefully make you think a little bit. Sure. In a different, in a different way than how you thought about Prada records for up till now.
Yeah. Well, and one of my questions I wrote down actually kind of had to do with like the whatever progression over your career, mm-hmm. right? Because I mean, there's certainly been obvious progression, like from record to record. I mean, some of that too is like, okay, we were like children mm-hmm. at one point, and that you know, there's certainly changes to be expected from that. But that the you know, the question that I wrote down had to do with the kind of like blend of genres that you guys initially started out with, sort of being much more like, all right, here's this kind of part. Now here's this kind of part. Now here's this kind of part. And then over time, that's become like much more cohesive. And I mean, it certainly seems like that's deliberate, but I mean, what does that process look like?
Yeah, you know, songs were just like, did this riff transition to this riff, and that was just, and then we became a band that wanted structure and something very cohesive about each song. Like that, to me, that's been a very, I won't say like sort of profound principle, but something really important to me in what we've done is to be able to look at each song and not be able to confuse them for other songs. And early stuff was just, you know, you just a bunch of kids in a practice space and you just riff, break down, riff, you know, whatever. And we, you know, we just grew out of it, as most people do. But with that being in mind, you know, as far as the progression, like you asked, like I've also wanted to spend a little more time getting outside my head and being less jaded and going back to the records that like meant the world to me, which yesterday was listening to Norma Jean, which I haven't listened to in forever, but was like my end all be all everything when I was a kid. and it still holds up. Like some of those records, not at all. Turns out, I was waiting to get my oil changed, and I started with "Oh God, the Aftermath," which was a really important record to me, and still to me, it holds up big time. And a lot of things I would change about it, as far as like just mentioning, like being able to swap out different riffs and different songs. Like that record is definitely, a lot of those songs are interchangeable, or those riffs.
It's just like any riff could go into any other riff.
Yeah. But at the same time, like I, as a avid fan of the metal genre, like I still want that in certain records and whatnot. But at the same time, that's not what Prada looks to produce so much as what we did at one point, you know?
Right. Yeah, I was just having a similar conversation about like stuff that you used to love and what holds up and what doesn't. It's fascinating because like, you know, my perspective as like a 15-year-old or whatever, I held all these records on like the exact same plane and listening to them as an adult, like some of them are just terrible, but some are like surprisingly good.
For sure.
Did you ever listen to Curl Up and Die?
Not much. Like I didn't have the records, but they were like pretty grind, weren't they?
I mean, they were just like a pretty like metalcore, like chug minor second, like that type of situation, right? They actually sounded a lot like early Every Time I Die. Okay. And you know, I was astonished at how much I still liked it. Like of all the things that I listened to at that time, some of which I just can't really stomach anymore. Right. Like we were listening to that and I was like, this is actually like, this is way better than I would have expected.
And it like, that kind of leads to like another tick I've had is that, and I don't know if you felt this way at all before. And I was thinking about if when you were talking to James Harm's Way, is it seems like young music these days is always like no one is ever outspoken about influences. So like this is really this is cocky and arrogant of me to say, but I'll have to be honest. Like I always admire when a younger band that's like touring with Prada says like, "Oh, that record meant a lot to me." Because for me, I'm like, I know it did. Yeah. I heard you and you're ripping off our old shit, like or our shit, like. So if you have like the clout to be able to come out and say that, like I always find that admirable in younger bands these days. And a part of going back and listening to older material has really been that for me. Like it's to be able to say like, yeah, it might have been an embarrassing little scene kid, you know, dyed black hair, straightened and bullshit and girl jeans and all that world. But I mean, that again, Oh God, the Aftermath is a fucking awesome record. Yeah. And I don't expect people to say that about our early records. And I didn't mean to insinuate that because they're definitely really, really bad. But
there are plenty of people who say that about those records for sure, though. And you
right, and I think it helps to acknowledge that. It helps to go back, like as a creative or as a guitar player, to go back and listen to like Curl Up and Die and be like, oh, like because I was out running errands yesterday when I was listening to Oh God, and I was like, I need to get home and play guitar like now. Yeah, like, and that's an awesome feeling. That's what like to me always. Like my favorite guitar players have always done for me is being like you watch them or you go to their show or whatever, or, you know, listen to a record or watch a DVD or whatever. And then you're like, I got to play like right now. And I think there's good in acknowledging that. I think there's good, like, you don't have to be so embarrassed as now getting older of, you know, being a little scene kid back in the day with all the extra small t-shirts with bright colors and all that.
White belts.
All that
stuff. Well, but I think that, you know, that you having that experience of like going back and circling back to that stuff that was influential to you, right? That I imagine that probably a lot of those people who wrote those records were like, oh man, like I was like a total dweeb then, like this sucks. But, you know, it just doesn't matter.
For sure. And like, that's always been like talking to Prada fans that are like, offended when we're like, yo, our early records were absolutely horrible. That it's like insulting to them because they're like, oh, well, that helped me with a hard time in my life and or this or that. And like, I never mean it to be insulting. I just mean it more out of a perspective of like non-complacency as far as like always got to do better, always write a better record, better song, whatever it might be. But there are certain guys that, you know, and they'll be like, oh, because I've had the pleasure of meeting a number of my heroes now at this point, getting older, and I don't know, the ones that have stuck around, like the good ones, are there for a reason. The ones that, you wrote this record that meant the world to me, and I can even slightly talk to you about it. Kind of like Josh talking about, I think, Lagwagon.
Oh, yeah.
And him being like, and a lot of musicians.
What was the actual story with that? He saw the dude from Lagwagon, and he's like, yeah, man, like I learned to play guitar. And the dude's like, that sucks. I learned to play guitar to Black Sabbath.
Right. Like, that sucks. Like, I would definitely, I feel like I've said things similar to people that are like, I learned to scream because of you. And I'll always say, like, why wouldn't you learn guitar instead or something? Like, you're just screaming. Like, but yeah, there's that. And I'm sure, if I said to one of the Norma Jean members that wrote Oh God, the Aftermath, they would have a level of disdain for it, but who cares? Still a great record.
Yeah, it just doesn't matter.
Again, not apologizing.
Yeah. Or like the dude from Silverchair, right? Where like Silverchair sounds like Radiohead now or something, right? And like totally disowns their Frog Stomp record and everything. And everyone loves that stuff. Yeah. And there's some interview with him where he's like, imagine if your high school band was like world famous. He's like, you'd hate it too. It's like, yeah, I get it, but Frog Stomp is still awesome.
Yeah, and like it. Yeah, I feel like this conversation is happening more, but at the same, everyone is doing, like, Prada just finished doing a 10-year tour for our third record. Like, everyone is doing 10-year tours and 15-year tours, and I don't think anyone is super stoked to be playing those old records versus the record they just released that feels cathartic, that feels, like what is them expressing themselves, because there is a certain level of disdain for expressing your thoughts from when you were in high school or whatever. It feels immature,
Yeah.
Or not like artistically, productive or reasonable, I guess. But I don't know. I thought, like, we just finished that 10-year tour on a record that is all just like riff. And like, I've never felt like more of like a metal singer, because I just had vocals through like everything.
All of it.
This riff, vocal. And like the whole set was just like planted, or it felt nearly like planted, because I was just going vocal.
Gotta get them all.
Yeah. And, but it actually wasn't so bad. Yeah. And it wasn't even like, the tour did well, and that's nice. You'd be lying if I said like we weren't doing it for money, because we are doing it for money to some extent. I've got bills to pay, but it actually felt it was the longest set we've ever played, and it actually felt like the fastest. Like, it was like an hour 15 set. And compared to like even certain 40-minute sets we played, it was like, no, it like just flies by. So I guess 10-year tours aren't that as bad as I thought they'd be.
No, man. I think that, also with something like that, where, you almost get to make like a whole creative statement too, in a set, right? That's kind of interesting as well, as opposed to like trying to piece something together. It's like, no, we're going to say this whole thing.
Yeah.
There's like an element of, cohesion with that I think is positive too. Certainly. As a fan as well.
Yeah. And you get to, you very deliberately curate everything around it too, as far as like, okay, like we're playing this 12 or 13 song record. Like we're only going to play 5-6 other songs. What are those 5-6 other songs? So
I'm laughing because I was just remembering I think it was on Josta's podcast where Hatebreed was doing like a full record set of some sort, and they just like didn't like a few of the songs, so they did something to the effect of like they took a break, but they played those songs on the PA like during the break, and then like came back up.
Really?
And finished the record. Dude, people were so mad.
That's a pretty. That's like a strong arm move, a very strong arm move. It's like Slayer. We've done a few tours with Slayer, and they open, or like a lot of bands will have like Prada. When we go on stage, we always play Low Rider right before, because we're immature little children.
Sure.
And like a lot of bands, you know, they have like these pump up songs or whatever, and Slayer just plays like Slayer.
Yeah.
It's just a MP3, it's just Slayer.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like doing a 10-year tour and doing that, I hadn't heard about Hatebreed doing that.
I think it was only like for one show or something like that. I don't remember the exact story, and I'm probably screwing up the details, but it was very funny.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I mean, even if I didn't like those songs, I too would have been furious.
Well, you know, I will defend Hatebreed in that so many bands these days, and like I always bitch about it, and I've become so jaded about it, is like the whole backtrack thing these days. Like the bands we tour with anymore are so backtracked, it's unbelievable. Like it's like of 10 bands we'll tour with, 1 or 2 of them will not have tracked parts.
Yeah.
Everyone else is just tracking parts. Like, oh, we're a 4-piece with 2 guitars, all the guitars just tracked. And it's like cheaper, obviously. And bands just do that. And like that in the Prada world that we somewhat reluctantly exist within. So at least he just like kind of bought all in,
Yeah.
I guess, if it happened that way, rather than like if they just went out and like, you know, acted.
Yeah.
That's seriously what so many bands do these days.
That is really strange that kind of morphed from like, yeah, you know, we have like some keyboard parts, we don't actually have a keyboard player, to like, we're not playing our songs anymore.
Yeah, boldly, just huge portions. That like more on a track being played than what is live being played. It's just like Prada's just got like to the point where we're like very outspoken and upset,
shaming these fools.
Yeah.
Ridiculing these fools.
I just like, for us, it's just like for fans, and we're like, well, it like if, you know, Prada's doing a tour and we bring out this band that's doing that, like, shouldn't it just as much shame on us for perpetuating the bullshit, you know? So that like there's that question too, but then you have the you know, this member of your booking team saying, well, they're drawing tickets, and then the label says, we'll give you some money if you bring out this band, and we say, well, we could use some money. Yeah. So shame on us too, to a certain level. But
sellouts.
Yeah.
Sellouts. Well, I mean, I think that the reality is, though, I mean, is that, you know, the amount of stakeholders involved in any sort of tour, I mean, it's high. Like there's a lot of people involved, and the reality is that if people don't come to the shows, like it's not just like, oh, that was kind of a bad show. It's like, well, you might have a hard time playing that market again.
Right.
So like,
I mean,
because I mean, I'm only saying that just because I mean, people hear like, oh, it's about money. It's like, yeah, kind of, but it's not just like, oh, like this check is the reason why. It's like you're dealing with an entire ecosystem of
an ecosystem
whatever that perpetuates people being able to even play music. Right.
And that's a very apt term. I mean, you think about like the effects, like the ripple effects of like Live Nation as far as your shows and whatnot. And for along when Prada, you know, we were selling more tickets, and then we stopped, or we weren't selling as much tickets, you know, we were declining. And the whole time we were saying, well, no, we're not playing that old material. We hate it and all this. And then I got to a point where I was like, all right, we'll throw in a little bit, you know, and it's in consideration of it, you know, it's a conversation within, you know, the 6 members of the band, but like it's affecting, you know, 50 markets on this tour, you know, and you know, these huge corporations and whatnot. And it's not to be so sympathetic to, you know, Live Nation or something, but there are impacts to these things. It's it's a lot thicker. It's much more dense than, you know, again, being kids, 16, 17 years old in a room. Like we couldn't, of course, afford soundproofing, so we like just bubble wrap the walls. Like we had like that. Like, and now, you know, you're having conversations like this on regularly about just playing in a metal band. Yeah, it evolves.
Very much so. I mean, it's not as simple as people think it is.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And then people will get pissed off at you too, which just can be frustrating as far as like, why didn't you come here? Or why didn't you do this or that? And it's like, it's not just saying like, oh yeah, well, let's go there, sell no tickets or whatever, when we have like this, like I have like these Excel upon Excel sheets of expenses and whatnot. Like, But then I don't know. For me, like it's I find relief in then doing other things that might not have to worry about the sort of political climate so much, which was like kind of why like Kyle and I, like why I started God Alone years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, or whatever it was to get away from just any kind of expectation and just make like rock music that was highly inspired and relative to what I like to listen to, more so than, listening to Norma Jean.
Yeah.
I'm not listening to Norma Jean, like 8 times a week like I was when Prada was starting. So yeah. And then back to what we were discussing earlier as far as doing other consuming rather than creating too, and finding good artists, good music, and consuming that and having that be my relief for all the bitching and moaning I complain about in Prada circumstances.
Sure. Well, I think that the concept of God Alone is really interesting too, right? Just like, okay, I'm just going to do exactly what I want to do, and people have expectations of me based upon, who they know me to be. And I'm just going to put this thing out there that's going to like confuse and bum all of them out.
It definitely does not aim to please. Yeah. That's for certain, and that's always been a primary objective of God Alone. I've always I've always just wanted to play more guitar. Like I started playing guitar a year before Prada became a thing. So I was like, we needed a guitar player, but I couldn't do shit.
Yeah.
So I wasn't going to be the guitar player. So I just ended up being the vocalist in this.
It's like, your pinch harmonic's just not quite up to snuff, man. You're like, I know, I can't figure out how to get my thumb on it. What do I do?
Chugs, dude. But I've always loved playing guitar so much, and I get to play guitar live a little bit for Prada. So I wanted to start like a Jesus Lizard thing where I got to play guitar, and Kyle and I had just become friends, and he started writing songs in the vein of Young Widows, which is like him and I's shared deep love of that band. And then he just like is a far better guitar player than I am. So I was like, I'm going to play bass. So I started playing bass, and then we could never find a singer. So I ended up becoming the singer again, although that was like the goal was not to sing. The goal was to get to play. But it's been fun, and it's been more exploring my voice and getting outside of boundaries, and I get to play more guitar in that band. So to some extent, I'm still achieving what the goal was, which was to play guitar.
Yeah. Use your gear.
Yeah. Use all that gear. What's funny is as far as like disappointing people and like saying like, hey, here's my band. Don't care if you like it. You don't. Is we had a music video made months, and it's now been months and months and months. I'll say months 3 times. That still hasn't been out, and it's going to bum people out so much. But the label just like won't put it out.
Are they too bummed?
A little bit.
Like,
they're worried about
upsetting.
YouTube censorship.
Oh,
but you've seen much more risque stuff on YouTube. I promise. Everyone has.
Yeah.
Like this, it has a certain scene, and I don't want to spoil it. No one's going to see it anyway. But it does involve sexual relations with fruit.
Got it. As in, like American Pie. It's just the scene. It's just the scene from American Pie.
We just edit that in. I mean, maybe I wouldn't care. I don't care about anything with God Alone. That's kind of the thing. Like, sure, God Alone is kind of like one of those endeavors where you don't say no.
Yeah.
Which is again really rewarding and satisfying, because in Prada world there are all sorts of parameters to weave. But yeah, you check out the music video. I guess we're trying to put it on Vimeo then, because you can.
Yeah, dude, put it on Live Leak.
I've been meaning to hit up our management team who it's Prada's manager. There's really no managing God Alone. We don't do anything. We recorded the record. The label just really, really doesn't care. I don't know why they signed us, but for some reason they signed us. I guess to keep Prada happy, but Prada's not even with that record label anymore. But we recorded this record and they just didn't pay anyone. And we did it at Electrical Audio. So like,
oh, dude, that's actually, I don't think I knew that. That's awesome.
Yeah. Like it was like a dream come true. And that's what it was like. And we work with Sanford Parker, who's like another like hero now, like acquaintance, buddy, friend. We got to work with him. We got to be in Electrical Audio, and it was seriously just like a dream come true. And then they just like wouldn't pay anyone. Yeah. So like it was like Steve Albini Corporation is like billing management, and I'm like, satisfy him. Like do anything he says. Like pay him, please. And then they took like a year to put out the record. It was actually, I think, a year, because I think it came out in August or September, and we recorded it 2017, like August. And they have an option for the next God Alone full length, but I don't think they're going to take it.
Yeah. Didn't move enough units.
Didn't move many units. Not at all. But we're trying. I was hoping we would actually be touring like right now. But Prada has tough deadlines as far as finishing the record. And
oh, so you guys are like, okay, we have to be all written by this point.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. We're getting into the studio mid-March or beginning of April out in Boston, likely. The other thing that in Prada world is we've only ever written the bare minimum. Like we've only scrapped like a recording once, but otherwise, like if we write 12 songs, we've got a 12 song record.
Ones,
yeah. So this time our John, who's producing the record, is like, I want 20 songs. And we're like, oh no. Yeah, that's a lot. At least for me, my lazy ass. So yeah, just a lot of lyrical creations to devise and a lot of content to produce. So doing that for the next 2-3 months. Didn't a lot for God Alone gigs, unfortunately, but maybe in the summer we'll see, because Prada's taking time off touring wise. So
make it happen.
I would love to, man. I mean, that was like how I met Andy and got to know really like everyone down in your world. I think it was Andy recording the God Alone EP. Got to know him better. Now I'm also a very big fan of Andy Nelson and his work, and
Ms. Jules
and his Twitter account. I pass along his Twitter account to the Prada group chat. Especially yesterday or the day before, it was experienced my first erection of 2019 this morning.
Dude, he was saying the other day, he's like, I feel like I maybe like shouldn't post stuff like that, since people are probably looking me up because they want to record with me, and they like Google my name, and then they like find my Twitter, and it's just all like weird stuff about my dick.
Well, he said the one, it was like bought body wash specifically for my cock and balls, which was just like cock and balls, like ugh.
It's the Adam Sandler skit. Did you ever listen to that thing?
No, I don't know.
Dude, it was unbelievable. This was like, I don't remember which Adam Sandler CD it was, but there was this whole skit about this mom who kept wanting her kids to like take out their cock and balls and like smack them around. And she just,
that does sound familiar.
Dude, I mean, it was very funny as a 7th grader.
The Adam Sandler CDs were like, I don't know. I feel like putting that on is kind of like watching like Austin Powers, like, oh, didn't age well.
Dude, we respect Adam Sandler in this one. Although actually, you know what? Happy Gilmore holds up.
Oh, seriously.
Billy Madison, not so much, is my opinion.
I was a bit inebriated, but it was on at a bar up in Milwaukee some months ago, and I didn't like audio not on, and it was making me laugh through and through. Like it was like, like being social for once in my life and having some friends around, and I'm like enamored.
Yeah, it was, dude, the part where he's with his hand, where he's just like so obviously just holding this thing. It's like 6 inches longer than the other side, dude. It's so good. Oh man. Okay, so a real question for you. So you always wanted to be a writer.
Yeah.
And you write a bunch of lyrics, and you've also written books. How does the relationship work between writing sort of like lyrical content versus writing prose for you? And do they scratch the same itch?
I think they scratch the same itch in that it does both bring me satisfaction and that artistic relief why we create things. I think that in Prada world, it's just like I've spent more time with prose and even like God Alone lyrics because it's exploring themes that just aren't appropriate for Prada, that just aren't the content that one should put over a metalcore song or a Prada song, whatever kind of song it is. It's just there are always these ideas that I'll have that when I write them down, it just the same, like in the analogy as far as walking into a different room, it's just writing down the thought in a different notebook to then later hash out and explore, whether it's something like the sort of prose garbage that I publish myself, or Prada world, which again has like these certain expectations and parameters to meet, or something that
in terms of what, like lyrical content, or sort of like setting it up for like knowing how you're going to have to like deliver the lyrics over the song, or what do you mean by that?
Like both.
Yeah.
Both. I mean, like there's a lot of desperation and a sort of level of direness. That's a poor word to say, but like
no, I mean that makes sense. So I know what you mean.
Yeah, like that comes with screaming a lyric. And certain lyrics that like God Alone will write about or whatever just has no place in being screamed. So that's kind of like the where I look to explore different ideas is the matter of desperation, or the matter of like emotional urgency that is required for a Prada song. Which isn't to so much like dog on that either, because then I get to talk about serious subjects that are important to me and a group of left-leaning individuals as we are, as far as like a song about gun control on the last record, and there's a song demoed out for the new record that touches on domestic violence, and that when you talk about these very real, serious themes, there does need to be a level of urgency to it, rather than like a noisy sort of drunken God Alone song, because that in that world I want to talk about something totally different. So yeah, I think that's where certain ideas go and whatnot, like I mean, like in both projects, I look to attack the president, but you do it in a very different way. Like one is, in a critical humanitarian way. And then God Alone, like, if I were to write a Trump song right now for God Alone, it'd be something with like porn stars or something,
Yeah.
Which would never should be screamed about in a Prada song.
Right. Yeah.
So
God Alone is more perverted.
Certainly.
Yeah.
God Alone it's just another thing where I can like talk about anything, and I can explore in the same when my like prose is like, exploring when I'm inspired by like Bukowski or Hunter S. Thompson or something, or Burroughs, not Thompson. I'm more inspired by Burroughs than Thompson, but, or anything like Nick Cave, which is my end all be all sort of God figure. A lot of those, some of it makes it to Prada world, but a lot of those are slimy and they go into the gutter, which is God Alone.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So it's like Not necessarily a different character, but like something to that effect.
Yeah, it almost it is. To use like Nick for an example again, like the Grinder Man material versus like the Bad Seeds material. I think there's some crossover, but like a song like No Pussy Blues by Grinder Man is much more Grinder Man than something like Skeleton Tree's newest record about, the tragic passing away of one of his sons. It's sort of a different character, but I think it all, for me at least, comes from the same place. I'm obviously not going to speak on behalf of Nick Cave.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's taking an idea into like a different room or into a different notebook.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess another question with that, your ambition to be a writer, do you feel like that is fulfilled by writing lyrics or not? Do you feel like there's still something that's like, you know what, I like doing this, but what I really want to do is...
Yeah, certainly. I mean, writing the books is that you get to write without the requirement of putting it to song. It just as much as like some things should just never be screamed, some things shouldn't be in a song. Or you can write an idea and have a song and then say like, oh, there was never space in this song to insert this idea. When you're just writing it for, a collection of stories and poems and whatnot, you can do anything you want. You're not taking your ideas and putting it to a melody or to song. So in that, publishing my own books and jotting this weird Bukowskian eclectic garbage that I write can just exist on the page and not to song.
Yeah.
And then even beyond that, I look to explore fiction further. I wrote a novel that I was going to finish at the end of time flies, 2017. I wrote it a long time ago. I guess it would have been around 2012, maybe. Not that long ago, but and it just kind of felt too similar to a short story I wrote and published. So I scrapped it, and then I came back to it, and I'm like, oh, I think there's actually some content here. And I presented it to two friends, and they read through it, gave me their notes and all that, and then I haven't taken their notes back to it. Again, that's like when you ask about discipline, that's me being very undisciplined. But then I wrote another novel that felt more realistic, and I didn't finish it. I'm about like 3/4 of the way through, but I haven't touched that in 4 or 5 years now either. So both of those projects are things that I just one day entirely aim to finish, and hopefully even get work with like a publisher rather than not publishing myself. Just in that's like a kind of a dream goal for me.
Yeah.
I don't really consider myself a published writer because I publish it myself. Like in that term, everyone can be a published writer, and everyone can be, but
although I do think that the publishing industry is in some like weird state currently. I'm not going to pretend to actually know anything about it, but
I hardly do either. I met a literary agent once a very long time ago discussing these things, and he left the company he was at, and I haven't been able to get a hold of him as far as running anything by him. But no, I don't really know anything about it either. But besides that, it's this sort of stubborn industry, the same as like the music industry being so far behind technology in terms of, record labels. But then at the same time, vinyl is thriving. I think books will always thrive. At least they do for me. I'm someone that loves the physicality of things, and that when I consume music mostly, or 95% of the time, will say like I always have to own the LP. I have to know where the band's from or the artist is from, and their history and all of that. I like to include in my education and my knowledge of a band, rather than being someone that like puts on a Spotify list and just, oh yeah, I like that band, that one song. Like I'd rather be the one, the obsessed dude.
Yeah.
So I tend to be that way with literature and music.
Although I think that there's more people passively listen to music than passively read. I think.
True.
You know what I mean? So I think that kind of, like you mentioned, that sort of, I just play my Spotify playlist and I don't know anything about it. I'm just content to have something happening.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of people who do that. But if you're going to read a book, like you're going to read the book.
Yeah.
You know, you're not.
It's a different means of fulfillment and entertainment, I suppose, as far as, you know, you don't read a book driving to work. You read a book if you take the train to work or whatever, but music, you know, you have on in the background. So many people, jobs these days and podcasts and whatnot, and books don't really, I guess they can though, if you like books on tape, which I've also found people still enjoy, which is cool.
Yeah, dude, I destroy some audiobooks.
Yeah.
Although what I end up doing is I'll listen to a lot of like business and pop psychology books via audiobook, right? Because it's almost like a podcast.
Right.
It's like I have some like clever little anecdotes and like a few main themes, and here you go, right? Whereas if I'm going to read something that's I don't know, more I guess I'm not sure what the right word is. I mean, if it's fiction or if it's more just like dense or whatever, I want to actually have the book and read it.
Right. Yeah, it certainly makes sense. I tend to like purposefully constrict myself within certain things, so I think it's still just to maintain that, like, I want to know things well, a few things, rather than knowing a little bit about everything.
Yeah.
Which, stated that way, kind of sounds like pure ignorance, but
no, but I mean, it's a trade-off that everyone has to make, right? Like, how much do you want to dive deep in one area, and how much do you want to have like a breadth of knowledge, and how much do you want to just be like a passive consumer and do neither?
Right. The word I love to use is capacity, and I was down here a few months ago with one of my best friends in the world, Micah. He does most of Prada artwork. Him and I used to live together. His band headlined Prada's first show. Like, we're from the same tiny town or small town in Ohio and whatnot. He lives up in Lakeview-ish. I was we were going over some of these things, and his wife mentioned like, oh, you use the word capacity a lot. And I don't know, I don't recall like how she, again, I was likely inebriated. I don't know how she like complimented it, but I always use that lens of the capacity, especially as I get older, and I wouldn't say like weed out certain friendships, but we have to, I think it's important as an individual, anyone, whether you're creative, self-employed, you have to recognize that there's only so, you know, sorry to be so cliche, but like so many minutes of the day, and there's only so much you can care about. And I think when people are more deliberate and intentional with that, it makes for better educated, more well-aware people. And I tend to, in my own playing a part of that, is like the physicality of music and books and whatnot. Because if I get too involved with something else, it might detract me.
Yeah. There's an opportunity cost to everything.
Right.
You're doing.
Right.
Yeah, and that if you're reading something stupid, you're not reading something good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And it sounds really harsh, but it's almost the same way as far as spending time with certain people. And I've getting older is I've been very deliberate about that as well, as far as how much time I honestly want to spend with people, because I enjoy being by myself a lot of the time. And then who do I call when I want that time, you know? And moving away from Chicago has been a real exercise in that. And that, you know, I'm down here all the time working on different things, or, you know, going to CME, or like guys at the shop, or eating at Handlebar, the things I love about Chicago, you know, and beer. And, you know, when when I have a night to go get dinner or drinks with someone, like who's the person I call, you know, like what relationship meant the most, you know? And I quite like it, really. Because I always get like agitated with people that like one of my biggest pet peeves is when people say like, hey, I have an extra ticket to a show, like who wants to go? Or like, hey, I'm free tonight, who wants to hang out? It always like pisses me off because I'm like, you'll just take like anyone. Like, 'cause I would never hit someone up if they said like, hey, who wants to get a beer tonight or whatever. I'm like, if you didn't think of me and say like, hey, like I want to talk to Mike about hockey or records.
It's like I have a person-sized hole here.
Yeah,
anyone
exactly.
can fill it. Yeah.
It's like I see it more. I guess it's also just like such a matter of social media, you know. Yeah. Like you couldn't do that when you just had a phone call. You called the person you wanted to, you know, see. It sucks away more of our humanity in some way, and I have my own bitter thoughts towards, you know, how people interact and people spending too much time on their phone and all that. And that's a whole nother conversation, but I think it all is founded in the way I create, and that primarily that I am a creator as a living. I don't know if you asked the question.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that who knows?
This is all.
Who knows? Well, but I think what you're getting at has to do with the idea of, again, there being like an opportunity cost to how you spend your time, right? And that if you are spending time with people that you're not getting something out of, especially as someone who is creative or introverted, right? That like there's a significant cost to you going and doing something. So it's like, well, why would I do that if there's not, you know, if I'm not doing something that's more valuable with my time than I could, you know, be using to create something, or that I could be using to spend with someone who I have like a more fulfilling relationship with, that for me as a person who doesn't want to interact with people all the time, like
for sure,
this is a better.
And yeah, I find that to be for the better, like in my own life, I think, in going about my numerous activities and hobbies, and again, keep using the word consumption, which it couldn't. Now I'm going to be a little abstract and parallel life with consumption, but just something to think about maybe on my drive home tomorrow, or I don't know. I started writing some things about life only being like wasting time. Now I'm thinking about it more so in terms of consumption, thinking out loud. I
mean, because you're sort of consuming your experience all the time, right? It's like,
it's just like a infinite means of consumption. Life.
Yeah.
Deep. Not deep. Not deep at all.
But yeah, I mean, you are just like effectively watching the experience of your life all the time, and whatever you are deciding to consume is what's presented to you.
Yeah, and managing the capacity. Yeah.
The flux capacitor. So what's the deal with coffee?
Oh, who told you about
boy?
that?
You're a Joe
coffee
boy?
Did Andy tell you about that? Yeah. I'm getting a little involved in coffee. We'll hopefully launch March 1st. I don't know when this will be on the interwebs, but we're planning to launch March 1st. This is I'm down in Chicago for another meeting regarding the coffee company tomorrow. But yeah, starting a coffee company with Micah, who I just mentioned, one of my best friends in the world, and 50-50 ownership, and he's all of the design. I can't find my way around Photoshop to save my life. I try. So he's the design and the photography and everything, and then I'm the rest of it.
The Joe-man?
Yeah. So I'm not it's not a roaster by professional terms. We're actually in conjunction with Metric Coffee down here in Chicago, who one of their owners I became good pals with about, I think it was like a year and a half ago, when another one of my best friends, the photographer for Prada, he is good friends with Xavier, which is one of the owners of Metric, who wanted to do a coffee collaboration, which, like, any collaboration I'm super into. Like, that's like what really is like one of the more thrilling things for me. Like, Prada once made Vans, like our own Vans shoes,
cool. Yeah.
which was like still one of my like proudest moments, which is kind of silly. But like, again, like I like holding things in my hands, and when we had the opportunity to collaborate with Metric, I was all in, and then we ended up selling out of it in like half hour or something. Like it went really well. But I maintained a friendship with Xavier, and then in the late summer, I suppose it was, he proposed the idea of basically my devising a coffee company in which Metric would fulfill. So it's sort of housed out of Milwaukee, being me in Milwaukee, but mostly physically housed here in Chicago. But yeah, we're working on that. Locking things in now, finishing design. The other like basis of it is collaborating, the same way that Metric collaborated with Prada, the same way that my coffee company will collaborate with studios and artists and record labels and whatnot. So launching.
So that's the goal, is to essentially have a coffee platform with which you can collaborate with other like creatives.
Yeah,
cool.
That's a part of it. We'll have like a staple blend, a few single origins we'll always be swapping out, and then
is it bright?
There will be some bright. I prefer a bright coffee myself.
Is it fruity?
I also like a good fruity coffee. Do you like coffee?
I mean, I do. I don't actually know what I'm talking about. I have a Blue Bottle subscription.
Okay. Well, Blue Bottle's fantastic coffee.
Yeah, it's really good, but I don't know anything about it.
Well, you're receiving great coffee.
Yeah.
And, same as like Gear mentioned me, I tend to be snobby with my coffee and my beer and my
metalcore.
Well, a part of the brand is I still haven't found a better word other than like gothic. Yeah. So working with basically saying, if you're picky about your music, be picky about the coffee that you consume, and working with artists and labels that love coffee and would be excited to work and have, the same way I felt when I had a bag of the Devil Wears Prada coffee in my hand, doing that with artists and bands and everyone. So we'll see how it goes, but that's something else on my plate as far as early this year. In the Prada world and God Alone world, I'm the one that like manages all the artwork. Same with like merchandise for touring and whatnot. And it's something I've always just really appreciated. And I guess I would definitely would have gone into writing had I gone to college out of high school, but any more like brand development and sort of creative direction is very inspiring and drawing to me. So outside of music, I'm going to try it with coffee.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a lot of the skill set up, so.
Yeah, it's the same as well. Like when I was a kid, I ran like a few t-shirt companies and whatnot. And I always really appreciated it. I couldn't really do with it exactly what I wanted to, and I wanted to spend more time writing. So I backed out of the last t-shirt company I was doing. I guess that might have been 2012. But that was also with Micah. So him and I are great pals. His brother is also a designer who also played music in Ohio way back in the day. And his brother actually does like the God Alone artwork. So they're wonderful, wonderful dudes. And now that I'm not living in Chicago anymore, I just take Micah's couch and I don't know, soon take pictures of coffee.
Yeah, there you go. And you guys, so you stay there and you guys brew up some Folgers in the morning?
All Folgers. It's funny. I remember I've always really loved coffee. Like I never had to like really acquire the taste for it. And when him and I lived together, it was the first time I ever actually brewed coffee at home. And I remember it was always like Dunkin'.
Yeah.
So it's funny that now we're
snobs.
Yeah, snobs.
And look down our nose upon such false Joseph.
Pre-ground coffee, blasphemy.
Disgusting. Disgusting. So how should I teach me about coffee? What should I pay attention to?
I mean, it depends. How do you make your coffee?
French press.
See, I'm a pour over guy in that I love acidic and I don't love earthy, like kind of hardiness so much. And now I'm just thinking of Andy, because I mentioned Andy, I'm like, maybe we could do a Bricktop collaboration because I want to work with recording studios. And Andy said something about like, I think he wants like really bright acidic, and he's like, Pete wants that dark shit. Don't listen to Pete or whatever, which I love because I don't know Pete very well, but he's only been the sweetest, best dude to me. But yeah, I prefer a pour over. Just like a V60 at home. So I usually do that. I'm not as highly analytical as a lot that there are, especially from what I've heard about like intelligentsia culture here in Chicago. I hear they like adjust their daily brewing based on humidity and whatnot.
Ooh.
Yeah. It's real. I'm certainly no one that involved, but I am particular about the coffee I consume and who's roasting it and whatnot, which doesn't answer your question at all, but I just asked.
Yeah, well, what should I pay attention to? What do I want to know?
Well, what do you like? Do you like bright?
See, I don't know what that actually means. I know it's a word associated with coffee.
I like it's the same like when people say like bright tone and people are like, what does bright tone mean?
Yeah, sure.
To me, I'm just visualizing like a frequency range in hearing like your treble highs. It's sort of assimilating that to the taste. That doesn't explain it at all.
Okay, so let me say what I think I probably like. Mm-hmm. I probably like two things on the opposite ends of each other. So I probably like something that's more like thick and earthy, mm-hmm. and I also like stuff that's kind of like fruity almost, if that makes sense. And I see those as being almost opposite. And those are
they can also like I just had like
I think I like things that are more extreme. Is what I think I like.
Well, like earthy, earthy usually means like kind of chocolatey.
Yeah.
But sometimes people almost even equate it to like tobacco or leather. However, I've been taught that you never want to taste that in your coffee, and it just means poor roasting.
Yeah.
So with that, I wouldn't really know that end of the spectrum so much. I certainly look forward to it more. Like I had, there's a roaster in Milwaukee called Kickapoo that I've really, really been enjoying. Pretty much exclusively been going with their beans or metric down here in Chicago. But they just had like, I forget what it was called. It was like a winter time or whatever. And it would like kind of taste what you expected, but like I got like allspice from it, and allspice I found, and I want to talk to Xavier about it tomorrow because he is the professional as far as I feel like allspice actually does hit both ends of the spectrum.
Sure.
And it's also something like I've kind of experienced with like rum. And I don't know rum well at all, certainly less than I know coffee. But that's something else I'm starting to learn is like being someone that consumes a rather large amount of alcohol and as like a beer nerd and whatnot. But the same with like getting to know certain whiskey better and certain wine better is learning what you want in your flavor profile. The same as someone that wants to learn coffees. Like for me, I can learn more about coffee once I start to learn more about wine too. Giuseppe, who plays drums in Prada, he tends bar in Pittsburgh at some of the very best establishments. He's a fantastic bartender. Mixologist, I hate the term. Mixologist sounds like screamer to me. But he's a trained like bourbon expert or whiskey expert, and like when he tastes something, I always find it really interesting. I love like sitting down to a good meal, same as like mentioning cooking and like people talking about what you taste. I feel that when you learn that more about anything, it also comes back to coffee.
Yeah.
So with all of this to say, as I'm learning these things more, I think that it all translates to coffee as far as someone that would prefer something on the extreme ends. I mean, like when you say fruity, like I always like, it's interesting to distinguish between fruity and like candy. Because you hear like some coffees that say like apple candy or whatever, and you would say like, well, what's the difference between like that and apple? I like, from my limited understanding, as I start to learn these things better, it's almost like the tartness, the acidity is always really important. That's the same as you're going to hear like bright describing coffee a lot. Acidity also plays a big part, and I find more acidic coffees to, especially in the brewing method, and like the oily, which why when I first started getting more into coffee, I used the French press, but then moved away from it more so later. But I've dabbled with like AeroPress as well. I've dabbled with the Kalito, which some people like swear by, and I have had very poor results with. But some of my like, there's a coffee company in Grand Rapids called Madcap, who's like top tier for me, like some of my favorite coffee in the world. But this is a coffee rant.
Yeah.
My apologies.
I find that I'm out of touch with my sensory experience in
Really?
general. Oh yeah. Like stuff like tone or like flavors or whether my clothes are comfortable or like anything like that, just like doesn't really doesn't get processed.
Do you consider yourself like a foodie?
No.
I hate that word too.
No, not at all. Yeah, I'm like a full on, I mean, again, I think anything that's like focused on sensory experience, I tend to be relatively disconnected from.
Okay.
And I think that working on being more aware of those things is like good for me, because then I start to enjoy stuff more. Right.
Is that something like you consider paying more attention to?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm like actively trying to be more aware of like flavors and like things like that, because otherwise I just tend to be lost in thought often.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't, I certainly, as someone that does try to like pay attention to it by no means is it something where I'm like, oh, everyone should do it. Like I feel everyone should pay attention to food. And I'm not going to go on a vegan rant, but like, food in the worldwide in the United States, is highly unsustainable and whatnot. And I feel that people should pay more attention to that, but I don't think that it's a requirement for everyone to have that level of attention, Same as like, if it doesn't speak to someone, like, and they don't have the capacity for it, then I don't think it's that important, I don't think, like, I'm not, sorry that I'm not like a wine sommelier or something, but yeah, matter of attention, I guess. And the capacity for attention.
Right.
But
I think a lot of that stuff, if you get into any type of meditation related activities, right, that like trying to be able to focus more on your current felt experience, that having an awareness of what's going on with things like flavors or smells or whatever is a pretty good way to kind of focus in on that, rather than just being like lost in to-do lists and ideas like, oh yeah, maybe I should.
Yeah. I think it's different for everyone. Do you meditate?
Medium. So the way that most people are with most health related habits is how I am with meditation.
Okay.
Right. Like, I mean, a lot of other stuff I'm very dialed in with exercise and diet and everything. Meditation, I'll do it pretty consistently for a few weeks and then stop for a few months and then dabble again and then stop. And
I think it would. Well, I know yoga would help me a lot as well in my physical ailments as I get old and getting sore, and still trying to I just played hockey for the first time in months a few days ago, and I'm really feeling it in my loins.
The
today.
old groin.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
So I need to I want to start taking better attention on my end on some of those, especially yoga and stretching, especially I don't know why my hips are hurting these days, for fuck's sake. Going on tour and my hips hurt.
Yeah.
What is this?
There's a lot of sitting on tour.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of sitting on tour. And I used to be better about exercise, and now my knees are just so shot that I've always really loved running. And now I'm telling myself that I think I'm going to do irreversible damage if I keep trying to push it. Because in strengthening, I get to a certain point and then it just doesn't get better. It only gets worse.
Yeah.
Well, funny, ice skating, which is still a fair amount of impact, is great for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm I think I need to just limit down my exercise to some extent, and on what is better in the long run. I used to exercise on tour all the time. I find it interesting about all these buff, very healthy, fit dudes you speak with and whatnot, exercising on tour and whatnot, because I found that my voice stopped working as well.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Which I will be the first to admit it is likely placebo. It's so much of everything with your voice is placebo. If you do this, if some routine is off a little bit, then my voice is fucked up, even though that more than likely it isn't. I'm just telling myself. And then, so yeah, I don't know how I got started on this.
Yeah. Well, I could see exercise either helping or hindering someone's vocals, depending on what's going on. Right. Because without really knowing too much about it, you're sort of dealing with a few different things as far as what your breathing pattern is, right? What musculature you're activating to sort of support your voice. And then also the increased respiration rate of exercising, right? That will, I think that will actually tend to dilate your respiratory passages, which could be beneficial, but then also just the breathing in and out may cause some irritation as well. So I could see that probably cutting both ways for people. And I've heard people just anecdotally say both things. Some people are I can sing so much better when I work out. Other people are it makes me feel terrible.
I think all things considered, to some extent, or so most things considered, I find that it's just as I've, again, 13 years in the band, just turned 30 a couple of weeks ago, it's just doing things different and not getting too stuck in something, and having not being so stubborn, because I can certainly be a very stubborn person, to change my routine on tour and whatnot, and to change different patterns. And I've kind of found my depression sets in worse and my anxiety is really bad if I can't sleep. A good sleeping routine and schedule is very important for me. And I need a lot of it. I'm a bum and I drink. And so with that, I found on tour, I'm if I rest all day, or even if I have a little bit of if I have a particularly long night of rest and then I nap during the day, my set will be incredible, especially if it's a later set, we're not playing till closer to 10 or something. But then that night I won't be able to fall asleep till 4 or something.
Yeah.
And then I wake up too late. And then when I wake up
next
late,
day's ruined.
Yeah. And so it I don't know. It's a matter of being open-minded about flexibility on tour, but then also maintaining certain parameters, I think, which for me is hard to distinguish. I don't know how we got started on this. It started with coffee.
Yes, we felt experiences, coffee.
Well, actually, in relation, not having coffee actually does me well as far as trying to take days off.
Are you addicted to caffeine? Do you get headaches?
No. See, that's a weird thing too. Like, do you get that way?
No, I mean, I purposely only drink coffee, 4 or 5 days a week.
Okay. See, and I just do the same as far as like also like keeping hydrated, because again, I drink more alcohol than I should, which obviously dehydrates my body. So with that, when I'm certain places, certain friends, certain breweries or whatever it might be, I try to be really intentional about, if I know, like my dad's a big beer drinker, if I know I'm going to be seeing my dad, we're just going to be at breweries.
Throwing them back.
Yeah.
All right, son.
Yeah. It's about as like stereotypical as one might imagine it. So with that, like I will try to keep away from coffee, and like to what like I might be like double dehydrating my body. Some early 2017, we were doing a tour. It was Code Orange. It was actually Code Orange half the tour, and then Josta the other half of the tour. It was the only time I was ever around Jamie. And then us, and then the co-headline was Kill Switch and Anthrax. And I don't know why I'm telling it doesn't have anything to do with.
And that's a cool tour.
It was a cool tour. But we finished it, and we had like a few shows wrapping up, and we were playing Louisville, and we are like encore or whatever. And I just like couldn't breathe. I had to panic attacks are relatively new for me. I think I had my first one probably when I was like 26 or something. So 4 or 5 years ago. And I couldn't tell if it was that, but I really couldn't breathe. It felt like maybe asthma. And I know my dad has asthma. I've never been diagnosed but I ended up, a long story. I ended up in an ambulance in a hospital, and then bills came later and whatnot. And it was just like severe dehydration. And, I didn't recognize it as such because my body just wasn't showing symptoms as to how I was dehydrated as a kid. Like when I was dehydrated as a kid, it was like what I would now equate to being like a really bad hangover.
Yeah.
As far as like achy and, the lethargy and whatnot. And then this was like, I was totally fine, but apparently nowadays, like my body, like just breathing in that kind of fatigue is starting to set in getting older. So that's something else to consider touring as I'm, now 30. And it's also how much, we do it. Like early on, we did with recording, I would be gone sometimes like 8 months out of the year. Yeah. And now at the thought of that, I'm like, no, can't, absolutely not. Like, we really hammered it out the last end of the year because we didn't really do anything over the summer. And I actually held up really well vocally. But I'm like, I got home and I didn't demo any vocals for like 2 weeks. I'm like, I got to take it easy. And no touring on the books now, not until later in the year likely. But getting older, it's really something. It was nice of my body when we did this 10-year tour, and we went out and did a support tour for 3 weeks. Then we did leg 1 of the 10-year tour for like 3 weeks, went to Australia, came back, and then did leg 2. And when we finished leg 1, the last show was Springfield, Missouri, and then all the gear was going to Milwaukee in a box truck, which I drove. So we finished we're all packed up at like 12:30 or 1 a.m. And then I have like the 9-hour drive in the Penske, and like venue didn't have a shower. So I'm just like in my sweat. I'm a sweaty,
dirty man.
Yeah. In this Penske, like my stage pants are beside me, just stinking up this cab. It's rather dilapidated scenario. And I get like, once I'm like almost home, like bypass Chicago up, like almost Wisconsin border.
Do you just drive straight at 1 a.m.?
Yeah.
Dude, you psycho.
I just had to like all the gear.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no one's going to like, if I pulled off, I was just like, and then like I had a bunch of cash, my laptop, and when I'm like, if someone came up to the window with a gun and said like, yo, give me the truck, I'm like,
there goes my life.
Yeah, exactly. So I just drove it straight. I made it. But like when I was almost home, I stopped at a gas. I was like filling up the truck, and I'm paying, and the woman goes, have a good day. And I try to say you too, and I'm like, uh-oh. And I get home, and I'm mucus. Like my body creates a ton of mucus when I'm on tour because I'm just yelling and yelling, spitting it up, and it's just like what I equate to being like throat lube.
Yeah. Throat honey.
Yeah. And so when I get home from tour for when I finish a run, like for the next like week or two, I will still be pretty phlegmy and spitting a lot, not to be super gross, and loogies and all that jazz. But when I got home after with the truck and I spit and there was a little bit of blood in there, I was like, it's like my body just like did the tour, like did like 6.5 weeks of tour, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, something like that. And then as soon as that like last syllable of the last show, my body was like, nope,
we're done.
We're
done. And then driving 8 hours straight in the middle of the night probably didn't help.
Yeah. Either. And being someone after just bitching and moaning about how much sleep I need. Yeah. So, but all ended well. Everything's fine. And, yeah.
Life goes on.
Yeah. Something like that.
All right, that's like an hour and 45 minutes. It's a healthy pod.
My apologies.
So no, it's good. It's good content for the people. So we're going to send them to your music. Does your coffee thing have a thing that people can look at yet?
No, I'm going to hold off on, we've got a name and website coming together and all, but I'll announce hopefully March 1st. So if anyone's interested in coffee, and I also don't want to say yet, but I have a record label that will be our first collaboration that I really look forward to. And I look forward to announcing all that hopefully March 1st, but it'll be online on my Instagram, which I would hate to link people to. but I shouldn't say that. I posted my book list recently. I like to keep lists as far as like
Instagram, a place for books.
Okay. I wish I spent more time reading than Instagram, but I probably spend more time on Instagram.
Well, you got to work on that, man.
Yeah.
Set up a little blocker on your phone.
It's nice that the iPhone has that now.
Yeah.
It's like I started doing the same with a click track because I started doing different exercises guitar wise, and I'm like, I spend an hour plus on Instagram looking at like BMX videos and pedal demos like all day, like rather than playing guitar. Like this is questionable. But,
yeah,
that's a whole nother story. We don't want to go past hour 45.
Yeah. We'll leave it there. Great, a great podcast, one and all. Thanks for listening all the way through. I admire your grit, your persistence, and your perseverance. Since you made it, I have a few favors to ask of you. Go ahead and open up the show notes on whatever podcast player you use. In there, you'll find links to all the resources that were mentioned throughout the show. There's also some links there in which you can leave a review or subscribe to the show. And podcasters are always harping on this because this actually makes a difference in terms of the algorithms that recommend podcasts to new people. So if you do that, it helps more people find the show. And if you head over to toddneef.com, you can sign up to receive most of my thoughts and writing, which really only go out to the email list. A lot of it never makes it to the blog or the podcast. So if you like what I have to say and you want to see some of my recommendations and stuff that I've been checking out, go ahead and subscribe to that email newsletter as well.